Welcome back to that Quirky Bird Girl podcast. If this is your first time tuning in, my name is Steph, and I come on here and talk about all things birds, from my experiences to what I have learned from them to what I'm still today learning from them and what I've found difficult along the way. I also talk about bird species, so if you have a favorite, now's the time to put it in the comments. I want to know what your favorite bird is. I also talk a little bit about how to make the experience of birds as accessible for you as possible. So I am someone who is neurodiverse. In particular, I am diagnosed with ADHD and autism. And if you're from the lovely autistic community, then you know that special interests run deep, and mine just happens to be for birds. I've been passionate about birds for the past 3 years, I would say, like actively wanting to do more within the bird lover community or the chirp chasing community. And I am just now feeling like I'm getting my footing. I feel like I understand so much more, and I understand actually that I was holding expectations to myself that I didn't necessarily need to have. So I'll get into that a little bit. And if you watched my past podcast episodes, then you've also seen me talk about that there too. It's been a difficult journey for me, and I want to share with you all what's going on. Today, I have something a little bit different for you all, and I'm really excited to be sharing it. So I've been talking about on my page doing a book club, and y'all, this is the first episode that we are doing for a book that I have loved, and honestly, I've only been able to get 3 chapters in multiple times, so every time I've reread those 3 same chapters, I've loved it. Let's try the whole thing this time, you know? The book is called Genius of Birds, and it is by Jennifer Ackermans. She's done quite a few different works in the bird space, and she is a phenomenal writer. And I think she also does a great job at setting up a lot of what I talk about here on my page as well as on TikTok. So if you don't follow me on TikTok, go and do that. She does an excellent job of explaining and grounding us in bird behavior. There's only one other author that I love as much as her, and maybe I'll save that for another podcast episode. But she is an absolutely phenomenal writer, and I love the way that she thinks about birds and the way that it honestly navigates life. I want to share some of what I took away from her book with you all, and we're going to be going chapter by chapter. So this requires some patience, but that's okay. We will get through it together. So getting started here, I always share the different chapters that we will be going through, and so those are listed right here. We'll get started with going over the book in and of itself, what to expect with the book. That will lead us directly into our how this will work. So specifically off of my page, I will be giving some brief information about the chapter here across all of the podcasting platforms. And then if you're interested in finding more about what I think about the book or engaging directly with a community that wants to talk about birds, go over, follow my Patreon. The link is in the bio of this episode, and I'll share more about that in a few minutes. Next, we have the introduction, which, yes, y'all, you can expect that I read the introduction. We always read the introduction. The introduction is a great setup and frame for the rest of the book, so we'll be going through that next. The fourth that we're going to talk about is lessons that we carry from birds. So what can we take away from this chapter from Jennifer Ackermans' work to help us in our own day-to-day, our personal lives? 5 is why birds? This is an argument that I make a lot here on my page. So if you're new here, you're going to hear it plenty more. And more repetition, the better, honestly, with this one. And lastly, we have what's next. This is just the introduction. We're going to keep going. And chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, it's only going to get better from here, and I cannot wait to share it with you. So be sure to follow along, follow this journey that we're taking together, and honestly, I am excited to see where it'll take us. Let's get started. This is the book Genius of Birds. If you are not familiar, this is The Genius of Birds by Jennifer Ackermans. She has a beautiful display bird here. I believe this is an island scrub jay. And then we have our trusted Penguin Random House. I love getting books from Penguin Random House. Not every book that they have is about birds, but every book that I've found and loved that is about birds has been from Penguin Random House. I digress. She gets started in the book just with an overview of what you can expect throughout the whole entire book, which is the introduction, so I'll get into that in a few seconds. But the way that she lays it out is very clear as to what she'll be talking about throughout the whole entirety of the book. Now, Jennifer Ackerman is, I believe she's from England, and in this book, you are not only going to get input from North American birds because she spent so much time in North America watching the birds, but she also talks about birds that are across the world. She talks about birds in New Caledonia. She talks about birds in England, great tits, coal tits. She talks about birds that are on the Galapagos Island, like the blue-footed booby. There are so many birds that she talks about in here that it just allows you to open up your eyes a little bit to see what is outside of your community. Oftentimes I find, especially living in the United States, we can get locked into what our own experience is. And I think that this book is a great intro if you're wanting to know more about what other birds, in this case, experience internationally. This is a great stepping stone into that. And then you can, who knows what you're capable of from there, you know? Another thing that I really like about this book is the way that she talks about birds. And I'll come back to this throughout the whole entirety of this episode, but the way that she talks about birds is so incredibly holistic to me. She has a really good, deep understanding of bird behavior, as well as the criticisms from ornithologists that have sometimes, well, in my case, I can say specifically, sometimes harmed my relationship with birds. And it was because I was thinking of them strictly from this like scientific perspective, which she opens the floodgates up and makes you think, okay, these are these criticisms, these are these things that are going on, but you don't necessarily, she doesn't say this, my thought is you don't necessarily have to lean into them. You don't have to believe them. Each experience is your own and you make it what you want it to be. So I love that she gets that conversation started. She talks about birds from a place of deep, deep appreciation and love, which I also really appreciate. I think she is a beautiful example of what we could all try to envision or imagine ourselves as if we were to carry a little bit more of the bird in us, you know. Her background is mostly in science and nature, and she's been writing about birds for a long time. It's clear to me as a reader that she has a deep, deep love and passion for birds that transcends what we see in a lot of media today. I think there are a few people who carry the appreciation that she does with birds, and I'd like to see more, so that's my hope here. Next, we have How Will This Work? So this is going to be super brief, but basically, I will be posting an episode on here once a week where we dive into the bird chapter. So chapter 1, chapter 2, whatever it might be, we will be talking about it here, and I will be sharing about half of that clip. If you're interested, again, in seeing more, you're going to want to follow my Patreon. The link is in the bio below, and that will give you a chance to just full access. You can talk with the beautiful, beautiful community that I have built out and found myself within since the start of creating content almost 2 years ago, and I'm really excited to just share all of this with you all and build more conversation about what we can do to help our birds. Our introduction. So what are the pillars that Jennifer Ackerman talks about in the first intro chapter? Jennifer Ackerman beautifully displays what she's going to talk about throughout the rest of the book within her introduction. So you ask, what does she talk about? Well, there are a few things that she's talking about. The first is resetting our bird experiences and gaining a better understanding for what it is that we are experiencing literally right in front of us. So oftentimes you hear these sayings, and she talks about them specifically within the introduction, like a bird brain, and that's supposed to refer to someone who's maybe not as intelligent or as bright, you know, whatever the assumption is there. It's not great, but what she's saying is we want to start thinking a little bit differently about the way that we frame intelligence when it comes to birds. And that's key in her title. She literally uses the word genius. She could have said intelligence of birds. She could have said bird smart. She could have said a number of different words that would have been accurate or fitting to what she's talking about, but she didn't. She chose genius. And I think that that's a really, really important distinction distinction. One thing that I want to call out that she begins to talk about but doesn't lay into as much depth, she talks about more like the scientific perspective and how ornithologists have been talking about intelligence with birds. I found the argument around that to be very interesting, and I want to add something to it as well. Intelligence is the subjective experience of the people around us. So the people, how do they see us? How do they see us engaging with other people in our community? Are they foreseeing that we are someone who is of intelligence versus not? This is something that happens a lot with aptitude tests, and she talks about that. But I also want to talk about employer-based assessments, because those are really based off of the normal experience, normal, so to speak. I am, as I said earlier, not neurotypical. I'm not normal, and I carry that with a badge of pride that I did not used to have, but I do today. And it's because of doing things like this, that acknowledging that, hey, whether or not someone perceives me as being intelligent, it's completely out of my control. I am not able to tell whether someone thinks that I'm intelligent or not. People withhold information, or they don't share as much, or some people just, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. It's their perception of who we are. And at the end of the day, like I said, that does not matter, but it's subjective. It's completely subjective. Nothing we could do once someone has decided what their opinion is on us is something that we are in control of changing. And so sitting in something and sitting in a relationship, a friendship, a work environment that makes you feel less than and continuously makes you feel less than, that's a subjective experience that you can use this subjective framing to get yourself out of it. Because oftentimes I find that once someone starts believing something about me, I can't go outside of it. I'm stuck. I need to be within it. I need to be that person. I need to always show up as that person. And that's not easy. It's not easy to always show up as someone who's perceived as being intelligent, because regardless of whether or not you are, you're going to have to put on some sort of mask when you have an off day, or you're going to have to pretend to be someone when you feel like it doesn't really align with who you are, and that person just got you on a day that, you weren't feeling your best, and maybe you showed up a little bit different. I think that having this conversation around subjective experiences that other people have us can really help us frame neurodiversity too, and I'll get into that in a different podcast episode. But the second thing that she talks about is the distinction of intelligence versus genius. So, right, this intelligence concept is framed as being something that is subjective. However, genius is something that you carry with you. It speaks to your actual ability, something that you're capable of doing versus what you're not. If we were to apply these to human values, we'd probably see something along the lines of resilience and strength and rigor and confidence. It's your ability, as Jennifer Ackerman so beautifully says, it's your ability to get yourself out of problems, unique problems, with trial and error, or sometimes without trial and error. Sometimes trial and error only happens once and you're like, good to go, on to the next. Sometimes you need more repetition. Don't get discouraged. Lean into your genius, because just like birds, we carry genius with us, and we are able to find ourselves amongst all of this, forgetting the subjective voices and leaning into what we know to be true. You just got to keep going. And that's what resilience is, and you're doing it. So just keep doing it. I will be posting a podcast episode about neurodiverse experiences and how it relates to birds, and some of this conversation will be carried into that. So check out that podcast episode when it is up. It should be up over the next few weeks, and I will tag anyone who's interested in the comments. So just make sure to comment if you are interested, and I will let you know when our new podcast episode is out. The last thing that I want to talk about from the introduction of Jennifer Ackerman's introduction is comparison, and using this amazing detail-driven skill, because we all have the ability to make comparisons, to help you become more confident in something like birds and something like, I don't know, if you love insects, if you love plants. What I think Jennifer Ackerman really means when she's talking about comparisons, or what I took away, is that it is okay to draw comparisons across species, across country to country, across this to that. All of these things embody your lived experience. So if your lived experience is, for example, I don't know, if we were to relate it to like a poor working environment, then taking and analyzing within and amongst yourself what it is that existed within that work environment that wasn't great and what you never want to fall in again, so that you can carry it into the next relationship. And I won't tell you that sitting with that isn't uncomfortable. It's very uncomfortable because you have to acknowledge that maybe there were a few people that didn't like you. Maybe there were a few people that didn't understand you. Maybe you were misunderstood. So many people, myself included at one point or another, have gotten caught in the trap of needing to be understood. And the thing is as long as you understand yourself and you do the exercises to sit with and try to learn why it is you maybe reacted the way you did or saw the things the way that you did, that's really going to help you shape and transform your relationship with birds. Getting back to her book, though, because I got a little bit away from it, she calls out how we can use our own frame of reference, so who we are. Jennifer Ackerman talks about how we can use our beautiful, beautiful minds to understand birds better, and that's not necessarily comparing one to one. It's not as black and white as it might feel. I understand I am kind of making it seem a little bit black and white. However, using little bits and pieces like, oh, hey, I resonate with that, or hey, I take that away. It's not all in with the birds. It's what does that help me learn about myself that I didn't know about my mind, for example, or about the way that I paint pictures or way that I think, or anything that you can take away from the birds are valid lessons. But just allow yourself to make those micro comparisons and then take a step back and look at yourself and see where you resonate with them, because I promise it'll be a fun exercise for you. So those are the three main themes that exist in the introduction of The Genius of Birds by Jennifer Ackerman. There are quite a few more specifics that she goes into as it relates to birds, but I imagine as we get to the next chapters, I'll be able to talk about the excitement of particular bird species, which that I am really, really looking forward with you all to doing. Stay tuned for that. In terms of lessons we carry, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but there are so many things that we can take away from birds. They teach us lessons every single day about what we need, about what can be done better, about how we can improve, about resilience, about growth, about trajectory, about all of these areas that we can really adapt and learn to understand ourselves better without feeling so much shame. Because I think often when we compare ourselves to others, compare our healing journeys to other people's, when we compare what it is that we're going through in general, it can be really, really hard to find community and to feel like we're doing it right. Because then if you are someone who struggles with perfectionism, which I used to not think I did, but I was brutally awakened with the fact that I actually do. When I started creating content, I felt like I had to do everything exactly perfect. Even with this podcast episode when I first got started, I felt like I needed it to be exactly what the outcome is today, which is something that I'm so proud of. But back then when I was first posting, I was so nervous and I didn't feel like I was doing the right thing. Is podcast a right choice? Am I doing it? Am I preparing? Am I all of these things? And eventually I just formed my own gut opinion around it. And now I'm like, this is my podcast channel and I get to come on and I talk with you all lovely, lovely people about the birds and I get to share. And that's only because of the lessons that I've taken away from the birds. All of this to say, if you are a long-time watcher, you can expect to hear and see more about the birds because they are coming to heal us all and we need to be ready for their journey whenever that is. So if you're on that with me, I am so excited to be here with you and we are all going to be healing together. So let's get a little uncomfortable, shall we? Why birds? This is our fifth topic for today, and this one kind of hits a little bit home for me. I've gone back and forth my whole life on this question, on why I keep coming back to birds at times of difficulty, at times when I am feeling my lowest, and at times when I'm feeling my highest, when I'm doing my best. I seem to always circle back around to birds, and I could literally never figure out why. I couldn't sit with the fact that, there's something about birds that just draws me to them and makes me feel like it's home. And for a lot of reasons, and I posted a podcast episode earlier this week about how birds have been this for me and what it looked like in my childhood, but I want to talk about just in adulthood for a few minutes. I have learned that it is so helpful and so paramount to my healing for me to externalize the birds. Externalizing the birds is going to be key. It is going to help you so much along your healing journey. And the reason why I say that is oftentimes it's hard to look at ourselves in the mirror and say, you know what, you deserve a break. You know what, you deserve a little bit of grace. You deserve a little bit of kindness. You deserve a little bit of whatever it is that you might not have gotten when you were younger, for example, whatever it is that you might have needed from someone or a parent or a partner or a friend. Externalizing it and looking at birds allows us to grow empathy and grace for something that's outside of ourselves. And then at some point, that shift can happen where you tell yourself, you know what? I'm giving the birds so much grace and so much honesty and so much kindness and compassion. What if I did that for myself? What if I turned that around and gave myself that same energy that helps me build a relationship with birds? And maybe just like I built a relationship with birds, I can have a relationship just as beautiful with myself, and it lives within me. So I don't have to go outside and experience that joy, that happiness, that love, that care, maybe that relief. I don't have to go outside to do that anymore. My home comes inside of me, and the experiences that I have with birds from here on out are just adding to that. They are just the joy. They are the peaks. They are the top. They are the cherry that adds to everything else that is my life. But the birds are no longer my life. The this, that, or the other thing, whatever it is that you might, they're no longer my life. I am my life. And I get to decide when I lean into the birds and feel that passion and feel that love. And it doesn't feel forced. It doesn't feel pressured. It doesn't feel like I need it to get by. It just feels like it's an exploration and I'm learning. And I'm going on this journey where I get to know more about birds and I get to experience birds with different people that I have looked up to for so long. I have a podcast episode coming out in a few weeks with Heather Wolf, who is a phenomenal creator, both across Instagram and TikTok. If you don't follow her, please do. She is absolutely amazing. But I have always looked up to her and the way that she has seen birds and carried birds within herself. And while the content that she creates may not directly be related to that, that is the message that I took home. And so allowing yourself to take messages from your own experiences with birds and then also take messages from other creators or just creators in general who love and care for the birds and share their passion on social media or in walking tours or whatever it might be, having gratitude for those people and those experiences will allow you to also carry some gratitude within yourself because you should be proud of yourself. Every day is a feat. It's not easy to live in this world. It's really, really not. We all have to struggle and to push through, and there are days when it feels absolutely impossible. There were days this past week where I felt like I was going to lose everything, including myself, and allowing myself towards the end of the week, because mind you, I struggle with this today. Like in the moment when I was going through it, I was telling myself, I have to keep going. I have to keep going. There's no option to slow down. If I slow down, I feel it. And that's the key. If you slow down and you are worried about feeling it, you are running. And to run, it's a great thing. I love running. And there's a time and place for it. But when you're running from yourself, all you're ever going to find is pain. So it's really, really important for you to find within yourself the love that you can carry for the birds, for your experiences, and across the board, just accept what it is that comes your way. Because whether it's a great blue heron, whether it's a black-crowned night heron, whether it's a northern cardinal, there is a plan for you, and your relief at some point in one area or another will be granted. And it might not be for forever. No? It might not be that the relief is always present for you. There are always going to be new challenges that come up, just like the birds. Maybe their nests got removed from the season prior. Maybe the first brood didn't go well and they had to start all over again. There is so much we can do with the knowledge of birds and allowing them into our space and taking the lessons that they have learned to reset and reframe ourselves to just keep going. Because depression is an epidemic. It truly is. And y'all, look outside right now. Seasonal depression is hard. It is really, really hard. I came from the Midwest and I lived there for almost 10 years, and every winter got more and more difficult. There wasn't a winter that got easier, but you know what? At the same time, I found things throughout those years. Once I recognized how hard it was for me, I was able to find things that would help me through it. That doesn't mean that I didn't run from it. That doesn't mean that I didn't make it harder on myself by saying, you know what, you didn't do anything to deserve to see the birds. I would do that all of the time. You didn't do anything to deserve the relief. You didn't do anything. But you know what? We don't have to do anything. We don't have to do anything. We can just simply deserve rest, and we can simply deserve care, and we can simply deserve love. And that's enough. You are enough as you are today. Just like me, I wake up every morning, I tell myself these things, and throughout the day, as the day goes on, I struggle more and I struggle more with them, and I know that I have to come back to them, but sometimes it's hard, and I get that. It is hard, but you're not alone. There are so many other people that are out on this journey struggling, and what I think that we as people could do better about is talking about the struggle and talking about what hurts us and talking about what got us here, because there's nothing more that's going to heal us than leaning into people. And I know that's scary. It's terrifying. I get scared every single day. I do these lives, I come on and I create content, and every single time I share something, I get vulnerability depths where I'm like, oh my gosh, why did I share that? That was too much. No one. And then inflow the emails from you all, and you tell me how my story has impacted you and how you have felt differently or you have grown differently because of my story. And those things I carry them so deeply within my heart, and they keep me going. Truly. I can't tell you how many times I have questioned whether or not I was capable of something, or whether or not I was resilient enough to be able to bounce back from something that I felt was the hardest challenge that I had ever encountered. But then I get an email, and I get courage within myself, and I get resilience, and I remind myself of my values and who I am, and I come back to all of those things, and it allows me to see myself for who I am. And so I encourage you to see yourself for who you are too, because if you're watching this podcast, then you are already someone who's resilient, who's kind, compassionate, and caring. So just keep going. I'm so proud of you. What's next, you ask? Well, I will continue to be posting these snippets of our bird club across Patreon that I mentioned earlier, and here on Spotify and every single podcasting platform. But if there's something in particular that you want to talk about in the introduction, in chapter 1 and chapter 2, maybe you're ahead of me, leave comments on my Patreon for specifically what you want to talk about in the upcoming bird reviews that we're going to do together. Eventually, I anticipate these being done on lives and us just talking, but you know what? Let's get the buzz stirring first, and then we'll see where we go from there. I can't wait to see you all back here next week. Follow me on TikTok and again on my Patreon. I have loved this deep dive, and I will continue sharing with you all my opinion on this book and how it can help us grow and learn more about ourselves, because at the end of the day, that is our journey, and we just love enjoying the birds alongside us. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next week.